fear is nothing more than the edge of your growth. Think about that for a moment. Every time you feel fear creeping and tightening your chest, whispering doubts, telling you to stop, it's not a wall, it's a doorway. It's the universe saying, this is where you expand. Step through, and you'll see what you're truly capable of. Now, here's what most people don't realize: fear isn't the enemy, it's a compass. It points you directly to the places where you're meant to grow. You see, if you weren't ready for something bigger, you wouldn't even feel fear. Fear shows up because it senses your potential. It's like a sign that says, hey, you're standing on the brink of something extraordinary. Are you ready? The question is, are you willing to walk through that door, or will you stay on the safe side staring at it? Let me ask you this: how often do you avoid the very thing you desire most simply because it scares you? Maybe it's speaking your truth. Maybe it's pursuing that dream that's been sitting in your heart for years. Maybe it's leaving a situation that no longer serves you. Whatever it is, fear isn't there to stop you. It's there to challenge you. It's a test: how much do you want this? How deeply are you willing to trust yourself? Pause for a second and imagine this: you're standing at the edge of a cliff. Below is the life you've always known, comfortable, predictable, maybe even safe. But in front of you, stretching far beyond that edge, is a vast open sky. That's where your growth lies. The leap feels terrifying, doesn't it? But here's the truth: no one tells you the moment you jump, the fear doesn't go away. It transforms, it turns into exhilaration, into power, into freedom. That's the magic of stepping through fear. You don't lose the fear, you just stop letting it control you. Think about this: every major breakthrough in your life has probably come after a moment of fear. Learning to walk as a baby, fear of falling, speaking in front of people for the first time, fear of judgment. But you did it anyway. Why? Because some part of you knew deep down that the only way to grow was to go beyond what felt safe. And here's the kicker: you've done this before. You faced fear and you've come out stronger. So why do we forget this when the next challenge arises? Here's the thing: fear isn't just a mental block, it's physical. It's adrenaline coursing through your veins, your heart racing, your palms sweating. But instead of seeing these signs as a red light, what if you saw them as green? What if every quickened heartbeat was a signal that you're alive, that you're on the edge of something worth pursuing? Fear and excitement feel almost identical in the body. The only difference is the story you attach to it. So what if you started telling yourself, this isn't fear, it's anticipation. This isn't danger, it's opportunity. Let me share a story with you. There was a man who wanted to climb a mountain. Not because he was a climber, not because he loved heights, but because the mountain called to him. But every step of the way, fear followed him: fear of falling, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. He almost turned back so many times, but he didn't. He kept going one shaky step at a time. And when he reached the summit, do you know what he realized? It wasn't about the mountain, it was about who he became on the way up. That's what fear does. It shapes you, strengthens you, stretches you into someone you didn't know you could be. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Fear often disguises itself as logic. I can't afford to take that risk. I'm not experienced enough. What if I fail? Sound familiar? But listen closely, that's not logic. That's fear wearing a clever mask. It wants to keep you small, keep you safe. But safe is not where growth happens. Safe is not where your dreams live. Safe is the comfort zone, and nothing new ever blooms there. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's easy to say, face your fears, but how do you actually do it? Start small. Fear doesn't demand grand gestures, it demands a single courageous step. Maybe it's having one uncomfortable conversation. Maybe it's saying yes to an opportunity that feels a little too big. Maybe it's simply admitting to yourself what you truly want. Whatever it is, take that first step. Because here's the truth: every time you move through fear, you expand your capacity for courage. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Here's a powerful trick when fear arises. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Often, the worst case scenario isn't as catastrophic as your mind makes it out to be. And even if it does happen, could you handle it? Could you grow from it? The answer almost always is yes, you're stronger than you think, braver than you know. And fear is simply an invitation to prove it to yourself. Let me tell you another secret on the other side of fear is a version of you that you haven't met yet. And that version of you, they're wiser, more resilient, more alive. But you can't meet them by staying where you are. You have to walk through the fear, even when your legs are trembling. Because every step you take through fear is a step toward becoming. Think about it this way, fear and faith are two sides of the same coin. Both require you to believe in something you can't see. Fear asks you to believe in failure, in loss, in not being enough. Faith asks you to believe in possibility, in abundance, in your infinite potential. So which one are you going to choose? Every time you feel fear, you have a choice. Do I let it shrink me, or do I let it expand me? Here's a challenge for you the next time fear shows up. Don't run from it. Sit with it. Feel it. Ask it, what are you here to teach me? What's the growth waiting for me on the other side? Because fear always has something to teach us about our limits, our beliefs, our deepest desires. When you lean into it, you'll discover that it's not as big or as scary as it seems. It's just a shadow on the wall. And the moment you shine light on it, it disappears. And here's the final thought I'll leave you with. Life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. Every great adventure, every big dream, every transformative moment, it all starts with stepping through fear. So the next time you find yourself standing at the doorway of expansion, trembling with doubt, remember this: fear is nothing more than the edge of your growth. Dare to step through it. Your comfort zone is a cage, not a prison with locked bars, but a cage you've built yourself piece by piece, thought by thought, belief by belief by belief. And here's the twist: the key has been in your hand all along. Right now, this very moment, you hold the power to open that door and step into something extraordinary. But the question is, will you use it? Think about this: how often do you stay in the same routines, follow the same patterns, make the same safe choices, not because they fulfill you, but because they're familiar? Familiarity feels like safety, doesn't it? It feels like control. But here's the truth: what we call safety is often just stagnation. The comfort zone isn't a place where we thrive, it's a place where we hide. And the longer you stay in it, the smaller it gets, closing in on you until it's no longer comfortable at all. Have you ever seen a bird in a cage, the door wide open, but it doesn't fly? It doesn't leave because it's forgotten what the open sky feels like. That's what happens when we stay in our comfort zones for too long. We forget that we're meant to soar, not settle. So I ask you, what's keeping you in the cage? What invisible walls have you accepted as your boundaries? And more importantly, what would it take for you to unlock the door and step into the unknown? Let's get real for a moment. The cage isn't made of steel, it's made of fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of being seen, fear of change. But here's the secret: fear doesn't actually keep you safe. It keeps you small. It whispers, stay here where it's comfortable. Don't risk the unknown, but let me tell you something: the unknown is where the magic happens. It's where your greatest potential lies. And the only thing standing between you and that life is the courage to turn the key. Take a moment and imagine this: you're sitting in a cozy, familiar room. It's warm, it's predictable, and you know every corner of it. But outside, through a door that's been closed for years, there's a vast open field. You can see it through the window, the sunlight, the endless possibilities, the adventures waiting for you. But stepping outside feels terrifying. What if it's uncomfortable? What if you stumble? What if you're not ready? Here's the thing: the longer you stay in the room, the more you'll convince yourself that the field isn't for you, that it's safer to stay put. But deep down, you know the truth: you weren't born to sit in that room. You were born to run in that field, to feel the wind on your face, to explore the unknown. Here's a story you might relate to. There was a man who spent his whole life dreaming of traveling the world. He'd sit at his desk, looking at maps, imagining the places he'd go and the adventures he'd have. But every time he thought about booking that first ticket, fear would creep in. What if I get lost? What if I don't have enough money? What if something goes wrong, and so he stayed in his comfort zone year after year after year until one day he realized something the cage he'd been living in wasn't real. It was a story he'd been telling himself. And the moment he decided to stop believing it, the cage disappeared. He booked the ticket, and his life was never the same again. Now think about your own life. What dream, what goal, what version of yourself is waiting just outside your comfort zone? Maybe it's starting that business you've been thinking about for years. Maybe it's pursuing a relationship that scares you because it feels too big, too real. Maybe it's simply standing up for yourself and saying, this is who I am. Whatever it is, you already have the key. You don't need permission. You don't need to wait for the right time. The door is already unlocked. You just have to decide to walk through it. Here's where most people get stuck. They think they need to feel ready before they step out of their comfort zone. But let me tell you something, you will never feel ready. Readiness is a myth. If you wait until you're ready, you'll spend your whole life waiting. The truth is, courage doesn't come before the leap, it comes after. You step into the unknown and then you realize you're braver than you thought. You take the risk and then you discover your strength. So stop waiting for the perfect moment. The perfect moment is now. Do you know why the unknown feels so terrifying? Because your mind craves certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants to know exactly what's on the other side of that door. But life doesn't work like that, does it? The unknown doesn't come with a map. It comes with trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the process, trust that whatever happens, you'll figure it out, because you will. You've done it before. Think back to a time when you took a risk, when you stepped into the unknown despite the fear. Maybe it was starting a new job, moving to a new city, or saying yes to an opportunity that scared you. It wasn't easy, was it? But you made it through. And on the other side, you found something you never would have discovered if you'd stayed in the cage. Here's a powerful exercise for you. Close your eyes and imagine the life you truly want, the one that feels expansive, exciting, maybe even a little scary. Now picture yourself holding the key to your comfort zone. Visualize yourself unlocking that door and stepping out. How does it feel? Scary, yes, but also exhilarating. That's the feeling of freedom. That's the feeling of growth. And every time you step out of the cage, that feeling gets bigger, brighter, stronger. I'll let you in on a little secret. The cage will always try to call you back. Even after you step out, there will be moments when you're tempted to retreat, to run back to what's familiar. That's normal. Growth isn't a straight line, it's a dance. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But every time you choose to keep going, to stay outside the cage, you're building a new comfort zone. One that's bigger, more expansive, more aligned with who you're becoming. And here's the most beautiful part. The more you step out of your comfort zone, the more you inspire others to do the same. Your courage becomes a ripple effect. Your willingness to explore the unknown shows others that it's possible. So when you take that first step, you're not just freeing yourself, you're showing the people around you, your friends, your family, your community, that they can free themselves too. So let me ask you one final question. If your comfort zone is a cage and the key is already in your hand, what are you waiting for? The door is open. True freedom is waiting. All you have to do is take the first step. Ask yourself, is this fear keeping me safe or is it keeping me small? Pause and really let that question sink in. Because the answer to it, your answer, holds the key to your next step, to whether you'll stay stuck in the confines of what you know or soar into the vast unknown of what you could become. Now think about this, fear is not your enemy, it's your protector, your guardian. But sometimes that guardian gets overzealous. It starts seeing every challenge as a threat, every risk as a danger. It whispers, stay here, stay safe, don't rock the boat, and in certain moments that's exactly what you need. Fear keeps you from stepping into actual harm, walking into traffic, touching fire, diving headfirst into something you're truly unprepared for. In those cases, fear is your ally, the one saying, not yet, wait. And here's the critical, but there are other times when fear isn't protecting you at all. It's imprisoning you, it's not keeping you safe, it's keeping you small. You see, fear doesn't always know the difference between danger and growth. To fear, the unknown feels the same as the unsafe. So every time you stand on the edge of something new, something bigger, something outside the boundaries of what you've known, fear pipes up. No, don't go there. It's too risky. Stay where you are. But here's the question: how often do we confuse comfortable with safe? Just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's good for us. Think about a bird in a cage. The cage might feel safe, it's predictable, secure, free from predators, but it's also a prison. The bird was born to fly, not sit on a perch. And you, my friend, were born to soar. So I ask you again, is this fear keeping you safe, or is it keeping you small? Let me share something with you. Have you ever noticed how fear and excitement feel almost identical? Your heart races, your palms sweat, your breath quickens. The physical sensations are the same. The only difference is the story you're telling yourself. Fear says, I can't do this, I'm not ready. Excitement says, this is new, this is thrilling. So what if, in those moments of hesitation, you simply change the narrative? Instead of saying, I'm afraid, you say, I'm afraid, you say, I'm excited. Imagine how that shift could change everything. Here's an example. Think back to a time when you tried something that scared you. Maybe it was giving a speech, starting a new job, or moving to a new city. At first, fear probably screamed in your ear, don't do it. What if you fail? What if you're not good enough, but you did it anyway? And what happened? You grew, you adapted, you discovered strength you didn't know you had. That's the thing about fear, it's loudest right before the breakthrough. It tries to hold you back because it senses that you're on the verge of expansion. It's not trying to stop you because you're weak, it's trying to stop you because you're powerful. Now let me challenge you, the next time fear shows up, don't automatically retreat. Instead, get curious. Ask yourself, what's this fear really about? Is it warning me of actual danger, or is it just resistance to change? 9 times out of 10, you'll realize it's the latter. And here's the thing about resistance, it's always strongest when you're closest to a breakthrough. It's like the final boss in a video game. It shows up not to stop you, but to test how badly you want what's on the other side. Imagine standing in front of a closed door. Fear tells you to turn around, to stay on this side where it's familiar. But what's behind that door? What if it's everything you've ever wanted? The life you've dreamed of, the person you're meant to be, the experiences that make your soul come alive, they're all on the other side of that door. And the only thing standing between you and that life is the courage to open it. Now let's get practical. How do you move through fear? Start by naming it. When fear feels big and vague, it's overwhelming. But when you name it, when you say, I'm afraid of being judged, or I'm afraid of failing, you take back some of the power. You shine a light on the shadow, and suddenly it's not as scary as it seemed. Then ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Go ahead, let your mind play out the scenario. Most of the time, the worst case scenario isn't as catastrophic as it feels in the. And even if it does happen, ask yourself, could I handle it? Could I recover? Could I learn from it? The answer almost always is yes. You've survived every challenge you faced so far, haven't you? You've come out stronger, wiser, more resilient. So what makes this time any different? And here's another trick: reframe fear as a signpost. Instead of seeing it as a barrier, see it as a guide. Fear shows you where you have room to grow, where you're about to expand. If something scares you, it's often because it matters to you. Think about that. Fear and passion are 2 sides of the same coin. So if you're feeling fear, it's a clue, a whisper from your soul saying, this is important. Pay attention. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman who wanted to start her own business. She had the vision, the skills, the passion, but every time she thought about leaving her stable job, fear gripped her. What if I fail? What if I lose everything she thought? For years, she stayed in that job, miserable but comfortable. And then one day she asked herself, is this fear keeping me safe, or is it keeping me small? The answer hit her like a lightning bolt. She realized that her fear wasn't protecting her from danger, it was protecting her from discomfort. And discomfort, she knew, was the price of growth. So she took the leap, and yes, it was scary. But on the other side of that fear, she found freedom, fulfillment, and a life she never thought possible. You see, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. It's looking fear in the eye and saying, I see you, I feel you. But you don't get to drive the car today because fear will always be there. It's part of being human. The goal isn't to eliminate it, the goal is to stop letting it control you. So the next time fear whispers in your ear, ask yourself, is this fear keeping me safe, or is it keeping me small? If it's keeping you safe, thank it, respect it. Honor it for doing its job. But if it's keeping you small, challenge it. Push back, take the leap anyway, because on the other side of fear is freedom. On the other side of fear is growth. On the other side of fear is the life you're meant to live. The life you're dreaming of, lives just beyond your excuses. Think about that for a second. Every single time you tell yourself, I can't, because, or it's just not the right time, ... you're building a wall between where you are and where you want and where you want to be. But here's the truth, those excuses, they're just fear wearing a disguise. They're stories you've made up, stories you've believed. And the moment you dismantle them, the doorway to your true self swings wide open. Let me ask you something, what's your favorite excuse? Be honest. Is it I'm too busy, maybe, I don't have enough money? Or is it the classic, I'm not ready yet, we all have them? And do you know why? Because excuses feel safe. They're like little shields we hold up to protect ourselves from the unknown. But here's what's wild, those shields aren't protecting you from anything real. They're protecting you from stepping into the life you're actually meant to live. Excuses are sneaky. They don't announce themselves as fear. No, they come dressed as logic, as practicality. They say things like, you'll do it next year, or it's too risky right now. But if you pull back the curtain, you'll see what's really going on. Fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of stepping into your power. Because let's be honest, stepping into your power can be terrifying. It means taking responsibility for your life. It means no longer blaming circumstances or other people or time. And that's scary, isn't it? But it's also where freedom begins. Here's a powerful thought. Every excuse you've ever made is a tiny prison you've built for yourself. Brick by brick, excuse by excuse, you've created a box that keeps you small, keeps you comfortable. But here's the kicker, the door to that prison. It's not locked. It never was. All you have to do is decide to walk out. The question is, are you ready to leave the comfort of your excuses behind? Because outside that prison is the life you've been dreaming of. But you can't live it and cling to your excuses at the same time. Let me share a story with you. There was a woman who always wanted to write a book. She'd dream about it, talk about it, even start a few pages here and there. But every time she got close, the excuses would come rushing in. I don't have the time. Who am I to write a book? What if no one reads it? Sound familiar? Those excuses kept her stuck for years. But one day she realized something. She wasn't protecting herself from failure. She was protecting herself from the responsibility of her own potential. Because if she actually wrote that book, she'd have to face the truth that she was capable of more than she believed. And that scared her. But do you know what's scarier than stepping into your potential? And never doing it, never finding out what you're truly capable of. So she started writing. She wrote when she was tired. She wrote when she doubted herself. She wrote when her excuses screamed at her to stop. And you know what? She finished the book. And in doing so, she dismantled not just her excuses, but her old, limited self. That's what happens when you let go of excuses. You don't just achieve something, you transform. Here's what I want you to remember. Your excuses are just stories. And the beautiful thing about stories is that you can rewrite them. You can decide, I'm no longer the person who says, I can't. I'm the person who says, I will. You can decide that the time is now, that you're ready, that you're enough. Because here's the secret, you've always been enough. Your excuses just convinced you otherwise. Let me ask you this, what would your life look like if you stopped making excuses? Take a moment and really think about that. If all the reasons you've been holding yourself back disappeared, what would you do? Who would you be? The answer to that question is your true self. That's the version of you waiting on the other side of fear, the version of you that knows anything is possible. But here's the catch, dismantling excuses isn't easy. It takes courage. It takes honesty. You have to be willing to look at yourself and say, this isn't about time or money or circumstances. This is about me. This is about what I'm choosing to believe. And once you take responsibility for those beliefs, everything changes. Because when you stop believing in your excuses, you start believing in yourself. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but what if I try and I fail? And my response to that is simple. So what? Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a stepping stone to success. Every excuse you make to avoid failure is really an excuse to avoid growth. But growth only happens when you're willing to stumble, to fall, to learn. So I challenge you, stop fearing failure and start fearing regret. Because regret is what happens when you let your excuses win. Here's a quick exercise for you. The next time you catch yourself making an excuse, pause and ask yourself, is this really true most of the time? The answer will be no. You're not too busy, you're just afraid to prioritize what matters. You're not unqualified, you're just scared to try. You're not stuck, you're just choosing comfort over courage. But once you see the lie for what it is, you can let it go. And when you let go of the excuse, you let go of the fear behind it. And that, my friend, is where transformation begins. I'll leave you with this thought: your excuses are not who you are. They're who you've been pretending to be. The real you, the fearless, limitless, powerful you, is waiting just beyond those excuses. So I ask you, what are you waiting for? The life you're dreaming of is already here. All you have to do is let go of the stories that are holding you back. Step into your truth, step into your power, because you are ready. You've always been ready. What if, instead of fearing failure, you started fearing regret? Think about that for a moment. Because here's the thing, failure is temporary. It stings, sure, but it fades. Regret sticks with you. It whispers in your quiet moments. It tugs at your heart, asking what could have been, what might you have created, experienced, become, if only you dared to try. Now let me ask you this, which is heavier. The temporary weight of stumbling or the lifelong burden of wondering. What if most of us spend our lives so terrified of falling that we forget what it feels like to leap? But here's the truth: the pain of staying still will always outweigh the risk of stepping forward. Close your eyes for a second and imagine this: you're standing at the edge of a beautiful forest. In front of you is a path unknown, uncertain. It's a little overgrown, and it makes your heart race. Behind you, a well-worn, predictable road. Safe, but it leads to the same places you've always been. Which path are you going to choose? Most people stay on the safe road. They tell themselves, I'll take the other path someday. Just not now, but here's the catch: someday never comes. The forest doesn't wait. And one day you look back and realize the path you were too afraid to take was the one that could have led you to your dreams. I'm going to get real with you for a second. The most heartbreaking words you'll ever hear are, I wish I had not, I tried and failed not, I crueled not, I gave it everything and it didn't work out. No, I wish I had. Those are the words of regret. And the only way to avoid them is to choose courage now in this moment over the false comfort of staying still. Here's the thing about failure: it's never as bad as your mind makes it out to be. We create these stories, these catastrophic visions of what might happen if we mess up. But let me ask you something: how many times in your life have you actually failed only to realize later that it wasn't the end of the world? That you learned something, that you grew? Failure isn't the opposite of success, it's a part of it. Every stumble, every misstep is a stepping stone. It's feedback, it's life saying, not this way, try again. Now let's flip the script for a moment. Imagine yourself 10, 20, 30 years from now. You're looking back on your life. What do you want to see? A collection of safe choices neatly arranged in rows? Or do you want to see the bold, messy, beautiful chaos of a life lived fully? Do you want to look back and say, I played it safe? Or do you want to say, I gave it everything I had? Because at the end of the day, it's not failure you'll remember. It's the chances you didn't take. It's the dreams you left unspoken. It's the adventures you talked yourself out of. Let me share a story with you. There was a woman who had always dreamed of writing a book, but for years she told herself she wasn't good enough. What if no one reads it? What if people laugh at me? The fear of failure kept her frozen. Decades passed, and one day she found herself holding someone else's book, a story so similar to the one she'd always dreamed of writing. And do you know what she felt? Not anger, not jealousy, just regret. That could have been me, she thought, if only I'd been brave enough to try. Now, I'm not telling you this to make you feel heavy. I'm telling you this because you have a choice right now, today. You can let fear of failure hold you back, or you can decide that the risk of regret is far greater. And when you truly feel that in your bones, something shifts. Suddenly, failure doesn't seem so scary anymore. It becomes a price you're willing to pay for a life that feels alive, for dreams that make your heart race. Let's get practical for a second. Fear has a way of paralyzing us, doesn't it? It whispers, stay safe. Don't risk it, but here's a little trick. When you're scared to take a step forward, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Play it out. Imagine the failure, feel it. And then ask, could I survive that most of the time? The answer is yes. Most of the time, the worst case scenario isn't nearly as bad as you've built it up to be. And even if you fall, even if you stumble, you're still moving forward. You're still growing. And that's worth everything. Here's another perspective for you. What if failure wasn't something to fear, but something to celebrate? Think about a toddler learning to walk. They fall again and again and again, but do they give up? No, because every fall is progress. Every fall means they're one step closer to standing, to running, to exploring the world. And somewhere along the way, we forget that. We start seeing failure as a stop sign instead of a stepping stone. But what if we changed that? What if every time you failed, you said, good, I'm growing, I'm trying, I'm alive? Now let's talk about the flip side, regret. Regret is sneaky. It doesn't hit you all at once. It creeps in slowly in the quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts. It shows up as a question, why didn't I? What was I so afraid of? And here's the thing, regret doesn't just come from the big things. It comes from the small, everyday choices too. The times you didn't speak up. The times you stayed in your comfort zone. The times you said maybe later instead of why not now? Here's a question for you. What's one thing you've been putting off because it scares you? What's one dream, one conversation, one risk you've been avoiding? Pause for a moment and really think about it. Feel it. Now imagine yourself a year from now, 5 years from now, having done nothing about it. How does that feel? Heavy, doesn't it? Now flip it. Imagine yourself taking the first step today. Imagine where you could be in a year, in 5 years, because you chose courage over comfort. Feel the lightness, the excitement, the possibility. That's the power of moving forward. That's the freedom waiting for you on the other side of fear. I'll leave you with this: life isn't about avoiding failure. It's about choosing the kind of pain you're willing to live with, the short, sharp sting of falling or the slow, aching weight of regret. One fades, the other lingers. So the next time fear shows up, ask yourself, what if, instead of fearing failure, I started fearing regret and then step forward? Not because it's easy, not because you're guaranteed success, but because staying still is the only real failure. The unknown isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. Think about that. All those moments where you've hesitated, pulled back, or let uncertainty hold you captive, they weren't meant to stop you. They were meant to shape you. The unknown is a mirror reflecting back what you need to learn about yourself. But here's the thing, most of us are too afraid to look. Why? Because we've been taught to fear what we can't predict. We cling to what's familiar even when it doesn't serve us. But let me tell you something powerful. Nothing extraordinary ever came from the comfort zone. Nothing. Every breakthrough, every leap forward, every transformation, it's waiting for you out there, beyond the edges of what you know. The question is, are you willing to step into it? Imagine this: you're standing at a door. Behind you is everything you've ever known, your habits, your routines, your comfort zone. It's safe, sure, but it's also stagnant. In front of you is a door that leads to the unknown. And here's the truth, most people miss that door. It's not locked, it's never been locked. The only thing keeping you from walking through it is your fear of what might be on the other side. But here's the paradox: the unknown isn't empty, it's full. Full of lessons, full of growth, full of possibilities that haven't even crossed your mind yet. It's where you meet parts of yourself you didn't know existed, strengths, passions, resilience. The unknown is where your potential lies, waiting patiently for you to show up. Let me ask you this, when was the last time you did something for the first time? Think about that for a moment. When was the last time you allowed yourself to feel the rush of uncertainty, the thrill of not knowing what's next? As children, we lived in the unknown every single day. Taking our first steps, learning to speak, making new friends, it was all uncharted territory. And yet we embraced it. Why? Because we hadn't yet learned to fear it. But somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing the unknown as a playground and started seeing it as a threat. We built walls around ourselves, convinced that staying safe was the same as staying happy. But here's the truth, those walls don't protect you, they imprison you. They keep you from the life you're meant to live. I want you to imagine something for me. Close your eyes and picture a seed, tiny, unassuming, full of potential. If that seed stays in the packet, it's safe, right? It won't be exposed to the elements, it won't face the risk of not growing. But it also won't become what it's meant to be. To fulfill its purpose, the seed has to be planted in the soil, dark, messy, unknown. Only then can it grow. And guess what? You're that seed. The unknown isn't there to bury you, it's there to grow you. Here's a story I want you to remember. There was a woman who had a dream of traveling the world, but she was terrified. She didn't know how she'd afford it, where she'd go, or even if she'd be safe. But one day she decided to stop waiting for the perfect moment and booked a one-way ticket. The first few weeks were hard. She got lost, she felt lonely. But then something amazing happened. She started meeting people, learning new cultures, discovering parts of herself she didn't know existed. And she realized that the fear she'd felt wasn't a sign to stop, it was a sign she was exactly where she needed to be. That's the magic of the unknown. It transforms you, but only if you're willing to step into it. The woman didn't just discover the world, she discovered herself. And isn't that what life is all about? Not staying the same, but becoming more? Now, let me ask you this, what if the unknown isn't something to fear, but something to trust? What if every twist, every detour, every unexpected moment is part of a greater plan? Think about it. When you look back on your life, some of the most pivotal moments, the ones that changed everything, they didn't come from staying in your comfort zone. They came from stepping into the unknown, a new job, a move to a new city, a relationship that scared you because it mattered so much. The unknown wasn't your enemy then, and it's not your enemy now. And here's where it gets really interesting. The unknown doesn't just teach you about the world, it teaches you about yourself. It reveals your fears, your desires, your strengths. It's like a cosmic spotlight shining on the parts of you that need to grow. But you can't learn those lessons if you're clinging to what you already know. Growth and comfort cannot coexist. You have to choose. Let me give you a practical tip. The next time you're faced with the unknown, whether it's a decision, a risk, or a new opportunity, ask yourself this: what's the best that could happen, not the worst? The best. Too often we let our minds spiral into negativity, imagining all the ways things could go wrong. But what if things go right? What if stepping into the unknown is the best decision you've ever made? Think about this. The unknown is where miracles happen. It's where you find the love of your life, the career you've been dreaming of, the purpose that lights you up. But those miracles can't reach you if you're hiding behind the walls of fear and certainty. You have to meet them halfway. You have to step outside. Let's get real for a moment. Most people stay in their comfort zones because they're afraid of failing. But failure isn't the opposite of success, it's part of the journey. Every failure carries a lesson, a redirection, a piece of wisdom that prepares you for what's next. The unknown isn't trying to break you, it's trying to build you. But you can't get the lesson if you're too afraid to show up. I'll leave you with this thought: life isn't about avoiding the unknown, it's about embracing it. It's about leaning into the lessons, trusting the process, and knowing that every step you take, no matter how uncertain, brings you closer to the person you're meant to be. So, the next time you're staring at that doorway to the unknown, don't hesitate. Walk through it. Trust that the lessons waiting for you will transform your world in ways you can't even imagine. say to fear, thank you for protecting me, but I'm ready to lead now. Let that sink in for a moment. Fear, this ancient primal energy, has been with you for a long time. It's like an overprotective guardian, always watching, always whispering, be careful, don't risk it, stay small, stay safe, and you know what? It means well. Fear's job has always been to protect you, to keep you out of harm's way. But here's the truth: fear doesn't know the difference between danger and growth. It reacts the same way to both. Now imagine this fear has been in the driver's seat of your life for years, maybe decades. Every time you thought about making a bold move, fear gripped the wheel and said, no, we're not going there, and you listened, didn't you? Because fear's voice is loud, insistent, persuasive. But here's what you need to understand: fear is not your enemy. Fear is simply a passenger. It's time to gently, but firmly, take the wheel and let fear know, I've got this. Picture yourself standing at the threshold of something new, a dream, a challenge, a chance to grow. Fear is right there with you, shouting, turn back, but instead of running or resisting, what if you turned to fear and said, thank you, I see what you're trying to do, but I don't need you to drive anymore. In that moment, something shifts. If fear loses its power, because the moment you acknowledge it without giving it control, it shrinks. Courage steps forward, ready to take its place. Think about this: fear thrives on avoidance. The more you run from it, the bigger it becomes. But when you face it, when you say, okay, fear, I see you, but you don't get to call the shots anymore, it starts to dissolve. Fear is like a shadow. It looks huge when you turn away from it, but the second you shine a light on it, it shrinks into nothing. Here's a question for you: how often do you let fear dictate your choices? Maybe you've been holding back from starting that business, writing that book, speaking your truth, or even taking a leap into a new relationship. Why? Because fear has convinced you that failure, rejection, or pain are inevitable. But let me ask you this: what's the cost of letting fear run your life? What dreams are you leaving unexplored? What version of yourself are you leaving unexpressed? Here's where the magic happens: when you thank fear, instead of fighting it, you reclaim your power. Think of fear like a nervous parent, pulling you back from every risk. You wouldn't yell at that parent, you'd reassure them. It's okay, I know it feels scary, but I've got this. The same goes for fear. When you acknowledge it, instead of resisting or resenting it, fear stops shouting and starts sitting quietly in the back seat. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman who dreamed of being an artist. She had the talent, the vision, the passion. But every time she picked up a brush, fear whispered, what if no one likes your work? What if you're not good enough? So for years, she kept her art hidden. Then one day, she did something radical. She stood in front of her blank canvas, closed her eyes, and said aloud, thank you, fear, for trying to protect me, but I'm not hiding anymore. And in that moment, her hand stopped trembling. She began to paint, not because the fear was gone, but because she stopped letting it hold the brush. Do you see how powerful that is? Fear didn't disappear for her, it never does, but it no longer controlled her. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act in spite of it. It's looking fear in the eye and saying, you can ride with me, but you're not steering. Here's something to think about: fear is always rooted in the future. It's never about what's happening right now, it's about what might happen: failure, embarrassment, pain. But the future is a story your mind is writing, and you can rewrite it. Instead of imagining all the ways things could go wrong, imagine all the ways they could go right. What if, instead of fearing failure, you started fearing regret? Because here's the truth failure teaches, but regret lingers. Now let's get practical. The next time fear shows up, and it will try this, pause. Take a deep breath. Feel the fear in your body. Is it a tightening in your chest? A knot in your stomach? Instead of trying to push it away, say to yourself, thank you, fear, for showing me where I need to grow by doing this. You're not suppressing fear, you're transforming your relationship with it. And when you do that, fear loses its grip. Let me ask you this: when was the last time you did something that scared you? Think about how alive you felt afterward. Fear has a strange way of waking us up. It reminds us that we're on the edge of something meaningful. So the next time fear shows up, see it as a sign that you're about to stretch, to evolve, to step into more of who you are. Fear's job is to keep you in the comfort zone. But here's the truth about the comfort zone: it's not comfortable. It's stagnant, it's predictable. And nothing grows there. Courage, on the other hand, lives just outside that zone. And the more you step into courage, the bigger your comfort zone becomes. Before you know it, what once scared you becomes second nature. That's how growth works. It's incremental, it's uncomfortable, and it's worth it. Here's a little secret: fear isn't permanent. It feels overwhelming in the moment, but it's like a wave. It rises, crests, and eventually fades. Your job is to ride the wave, not let it drown you. And the best way to ride that wave is to anchor yourself in the present moment. Fear can't survive in the now. It feeds on what if, but in the present, it has no power. So I'll ask you again, what's one thing you've been avoiding because of fear? Name it, write it down. Then say to yourself, thank you, fear, for pointing me toward my next step, because that's what fear does. It shows you where the next door is. Your only job is to turn the handle and step through. And remember, this courage isn't about eliminating fear. It's about feeling the fear and moving forward anyway. Fear will always try to sit at your table, but you get to decide whether it eats or whether it watches. So thank it, bless it, and then lead, because you are the one in charge now. You always have been. Thanks for joining me today. If you found value in this discussion, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more motivational content. Share your thoughts in the comments below.